Welcome back to my channel, guys. Today I will be talking about the Luderitz Speed Challenge, the most dangerous windsurf event, and an event that I have been getting a lot of questions about since I've been there for the past 3 years in my windsurfing career. I think that one of the biggest questions on people's mind who follow me is, why do I actually do the event since it's really such a dangerous discipline? What is my thought process behind it? And also my experiences at the event itself, not only physical and technical, but mostly the mental, emotional and psychological challenges that I face while competing at the world's biggest speed windsurfing event. I will probably break this up into a few videos, I think 2 or 3, where I will discuss the mental side of things, what has gone through my mind through all the challenges that I faced there and how I overcame them, especially how I still apply these mental strengths that I've learned over the 3 years in my normal daily life, for those of you who don't windsurf, and so that it could be meaningful to you as well. And in the other section, I will discuss all the technicalities, the windsurf gear, my tweaks and tips with regards to gear rigging, to all the guys who aim to go there one day and compete, or who are seriously into speed sailing or do it just for fun. This could maybe be very helpful for you. So everything I will be discussing is basically my personal point of view, my personal experience. I think for every athlete there at the Luderitz Speed Challenge, things are different depending on your personality and how you handle things. Firstly, I would like to answer the first question with regards to why I actually do this event. For those of you who are not familiar with the world of windsurfing, the Luderitz Speed Challenge is almost like the Formula 1 of windsurfing. It is where the world's top athletes within the speed discipline come to push their limits on the man-made channel, and who push their limits in order to get new world speed rankings. Not only do you represent your country at this event, but you represent all your sponsors, and this is also really a place where you are able to establish yourself within the world of speed sailing as a professional athlete. The actual speed records that I've set so far, although it was really amazing for me and great accomplishments personally for me, that only makes up for a very small part of the reason why I go and compete at Luderitz. The lessons that I've learned while facing extreme challenges are lessons that money will never be able to buy me. The amount of physical, mental, emotional growth that I've sustained while competing at this event is something that I will never be able to buy. The event has changed me on a personal level in a very positive way. And there is absolutely no way that I could have gained this kind of experience and personal growth as an athlete if I didn't compete there, regardless of my speed record. When you arrive at Luderitz, it is like the moon landing. There is really nothing there. There is only rocks, sand and nuclear winds blowing constantly. Everything that you are used to seeing and experiencing completely changes when you go to this place. It's very seldom in season time that you go there and there's absolutely no wind. But there are some special days where the wind does not blow, and then this place turns into an absolute paradise. You can really go supping and cycling there. It's really worthwhile to go to Kolmanshoek, where they kept the entire site of historical buildings that surrounded the diamond rush back in the days. And there are some interesting guided tours that they take you through and explain the whole history of the town and how it got established around the diamond rush. It's very similar to Langebaan in the fact that it's a small town and there's a tight community there. The people who live in Luderitz, I feel, is probably some of the toughest people on planet Earth, because everything is built and designed to withstand this harsh winds that Luderitz gets. The winds at Luderitz can easily reach 50 to 60 knots some days. That we consider super strong in Langebaan, like 30 knots, 35 knots, even 40 knots. In Luderitz, that is regarded as sort of moderate light winds. So just to put it in perspective, when you actually compete there, it's a whole mindset change to be there. Everything you need to recalculate, adapt to the whole Luderitz situation. It's completely different than your normal slalom sailing. Luckily, I knew I had some of the world's best speed equipment, so I could definitely rely on my gear and not have that as an extra stress factor. But it does take a bit of time to get really comfortable and used to these sails and boards and fins. Everything is built and designed to go straight downwind. The sails are way more deep and powerful than your slalom sails. They are very highly strung. So I would definitely say that last year my speed sail was out of this world. The sail that I used most of the time was my 5.0. I felt that the sail size for my weight was absolutely perfect in combination with my 37 centimeter wide speed board. The fin size that I found a sweet spot for me was an 18.5 speed fin. And this I definitely learned through trial and error by repeating the runs day by day, checking my speed on my GPS, when does it go up, when does it stay the same, and keep on changing things one by one. When you're at Luderitz, it's really important when you do make changes that you only change one thing at a time and see the effect of that. Because if you change two things at a time, you wouldn't be knowing which one actually had the effect that you wanted or had a negative effect that you didn't want. It's very unlikely that you'll set world records on the word go in your first time there, because nothing can really prepare you for what you're about to experience at this event. You need to almost start blank new, even though it really helps to have many sailing hours behind you in the months leading up to the event. There are still so many things that are completely different when you are on the channel doing speed sailing. In normal windsurfing, we windsurf at an angle with the wind, but at Luderitz, you are almost completely going downwind. So the whole dynamic changes. Your board is like almost a ruler length wide, and you are on top of that loaded with extra lead weight. So as a unit, you are operating on a completely new mathematical level. And to get used to those elements, you need to go to Luderitz a few times to get used to it and to sort of train yourself into the speed sailing on the man-made channel. It is also something to get used to going at such high speed on such a narrow ground with only this deep water below you. There's absolutely no room for error. If you lose your concentration for a split second going down there, you're bound to crash really hard and stand a huge risk of dangerous injuries. There has been some really bad accidents at this event and people leaving the event on wheelchairs. It adds to the amount of stress that you have when you are competing there, when you are considering all the risks physically. So a quick layout of how the channel works and how speed sailing at this event works. The channel has got an entry line that is sort of at an angle with the wind to help you get speed and power going in a very short time, and then follows a very sharp turn downwind. and this downwind line carries on for 1 kilometer until you reach the stop box. The channel is more or less 7 meters wide. There's just enough room for your fin and a little bit of gap underneath your fin before you hit the surface. I would say the most critical part of the entire course is the start block, because so many little things has to happen in a very, very short space of time. How the wind works in Luderitz is it comes as very strong gusts over the channel. So during your run, you need to sustain a very high speed throughout the gusts to keep you safe, because if you are losing speed and another gust hits you from behind, which is how a lot of people actually crash, the immense amount of power that comes back into your sail from behind will be way too much for you to handle, and it will throw you over. So you need to maintain a high speed for safety reasons and in order to set new records, because they do not take your max speed, it's your average speed over 500 meters. You need to be able to, in a very short amount of time, get up on your board and hook in, get into the straps, lock in position and be at absolute high speed before you reach the slingshot. Your entry speed really determines your speed record. You can't have a low entry speed and accelerate all the way to the bottom and expect to have a really high speed. So when you have got some of the world champions, some of your celebrities that you actually look up to, everyone is lining up in the start line. You have got a lot of underlying pressure to not fail starts, because it wastes time, and not only your own time but also the guys who are queuing up behind you. So it's really quite a stressful situation if you're not yet used to it and you've not yet learned how to control your mind and thoughts and emotions around that situation, which is one of the biggest things I had to learn. And there is no room for any doubt, because once you have hit high speed and you are going around the corner, there is absolutely no stopping and there's absolutely no turning back. You cannot just open up your sail and go to the side, because you're at such high speed going downwind that stopping is nearly impossible. And it would be super dangerous to attempt that. Once you've hit the slingshot, you should be completely committed and fully locked in and in position for whatever the wind throws at you going down the line. For me, it was a really big challenge to learn how to be light on my feet on such a really small board with this added 10 kilograms of lead weight on my back, without the fin hitting the surface of the channel. And this is definitely why I start doing so much more wave sailing, because in my first year I struggled a lot on the start line, not only because it was only my first time there, but also I didn't have the control over my board and sail like I wanted to have. So after doing a lot of wave sailing and my husband helping me a lot to get my wave sailing technique going, I had way more control and feeling with my board and my sail, because with wave sailing you've got also a lot more elements to handle than slalom sailing. So you need to be very agile, and you need to be able to feel your gear, and you need to be able to feel where the wind is pulling you, and how to harness that into speed. So by my third time going to Luderitz, I felt so much more in control of my gear on the start line. I had a huge challenge to face last year. After my shoulder operation in my left shoulder, we had a 3-phase rehabilitation program that I followed with my biokineticist, and we only had reached the end of phase 2. By that time, we have run literally out of time, and I had to pack up and go to Luderitz, which was already quite a mental challenge to get over, because knowing that the shoulder wasn't as strong as I've hoped it to be at that time. Nevertheless, I decided I'm still going, and I'm going to do everything I can to compensate for the weaker shoulder. Luckily, this time around, the left arm is the arm that's at the back when you go down the channel. I think that if it was the front arm, the right arm, which is what it is now, it would be a much bigger challenge. So, because you need to have so much pulling power at your front hand to control some of the gusts. I was also really not allowed to put it way above my head during water starts. I knew there was a huge risk for it to slip out of place again, because it actually takes 16 months to grow back together again and heal completely. And at some angles of positioning, I had a lot of weakness. So every morning my dad strapped my shoulder to help for that extra bit of stability on the extremities, that it won't jerk too far out of position. So I was quite sort of limited. In fact, it gave me a little bit of confidence knowing that I've got a little bit of something bracing my shoulder against anything weird that could happen in that strong winds. And in those strong winds, anything can happen. And it will mostly be when you're busy handling your gear, not actually while you are sailing. So the way I managed my water start was I didn't have the luxury to do a jump start, because when you jump on your speedboard and the gust hits you full on your sail, you really need to have a lot of strength and power to be able to manage all of that power that comes all of a sudden into your sail. So the big guys does this very well. They make a jump start look like super easy, but it's really it's a lot of power required. My water starts, ideally you would lie in the water with your feet in the straps, not hooked in. Because obviously if you're hooked in and you come up but the gust throws you over, you do not want to be flying over with your sail. However, I didn't have enough power in my arm to pull myself up with that added lead weight on your back. It's sort of like literally doing a pull-up in the gym. So the only way out for me on the start line was to put my feet in the straps and hook in, lying and waiting for the wind. And I had to really concentrate super hard to feel when the wind is starting to lift me up and control it with my sail. And just allow enough wind in my sail to lift me up gently and not jerk me up, and also allow for the wind to lift me up so that I don't have to use my shoulders to pull me up. The big disadvantage of this method is that it is super dangerous because you can easily get thrown over, and there's no room for sort of slowing down a bit or choosing the wrong gust, hitting a lull, because your entire setup will push into the ground at the bottom. So you need to be very in tune with your sail and let in enough wind just to get up and pulling in and harnessing immediately all that power into speed. It took me the first day to continually practice this method, and I finally got super confident in doing it like this. It was my only way and it worked absolutely brilliantly for me, luckily. The advantage for me was because I was so light on my feet after all the wave sailing, and obviously also after all my core training that I did, I didn't have anything else to focus on. I didn't have to, once I got up, I didn't have to think about still having to hook in and having all that power in your arms on the sail still for that time when you are not hooked in yet. In the end, I saved a lot of energy and power in my arms on the water starts for when I actually go down the line. And luckily, because I'm actually, for a speed sailor, at a super light weight, this actually supposed to be a negative thing, but for me it was a positive thing because it really made my water start so much more doable in my shoulder situation. I also had to be super aware of where my harness lines are, where I set my boom and where my mast track is, because I had to compensate for a bit of weakness towards my backhand. This is also why I spend every single day when the channel is open, from the moment it opens till the moment it closes on the channel, doing runs continuously, even though it's not a record-breaking day. Because I believe the more you can do it and the more you repeat the process, the less scary it becomes, and the more comfortable you become, the more you get to know your gear and your setup. Every year when we arrive at Luderitz, we get our speed boards and speed sails at that instance, 2 days before the event starts. There's no time before the event to actually go out and train at your home spot and feel the gear, get used to the board, get confident with your fin and your sail, which is why it is really super important that you can have 110% trust in your gear brands and your gear sponsors. So my biggest focus was to set aside all the negative thoughts about my shoulder and to think of every solution. At every problem, I thought, what solution do I have for this problem? I don't have enough power when I water start, so how do I compensate for that? When going down the line, where would my harness lines be if I needed to have a little bit more assistance on this hand? So I definitely moved my harness lines a little bit more backwards so that I can pull the sail with my body in rather than with my arm if I needed to harness a gust, especially going around the slingshot. So when you reach the slingshot at full speed and you are locked in position, the idea for me was to pitch as high top as possible against the bank before I hit a sharp turn going downwind. It sort of gives you more distance, if you look at the physics of it, to go directly into the bank and then turning downwind than doing a very rounded curve around the corner on the downwind bank side. So my aim was to reach completely into the upwind bank, which was in its own quite scary because you get super close, super fast to that bank, and the bank is not a pretty sight. So you need to push it to that limit and then do a very, very sharp turn, pull all the power that you have in with your backhand, which was my weak hand, but I managed to harness enough power with my body because my harness line was a little bit more backwards and I could swing back my entire body behind the board. From there on, the first monster gust hits you and there is absolutely no way that anyone would be able to explain the kind of acceleration that you feel. You almost get tunnel vision going down there. There is really nothing that can prepare you for the feeling of that kind of speed going down a very narrow channel. Your focus is completely in staying in a straight line. It's very easy, if the wind shifts a little bit, to drift towards the bank. You need to read every single gust in front of you because you need to make adjustment as to how you are going to approach the gust. If you are going down the line and fully sheeted in and the gust leaves you, you kind of sheet out a little bit in order to gain more speed to go through the lull. And then when the gust hits you, the second gust is where most of the crashes happens. If that gust hits you and you are sheeted out way too much, it will definitely throw you over. So you need to know exactly when you should be sheeting out and sheeting in a little bit, how you should adjust your stance during each and every single gust. If you managed to keep a very high speed throughout, you are almost at your safest. It's quite dangerous if you lose a little bit of speed halfway down and the second gust hits you really hard. I would say the stop block is, for me personally, a big stress factor and a big physical challenge, because you are going at that point so fast and you reach the finish block is really a short distance. You don't have any time to waste when you want to come to a stop and dump all that speed in such a short space of time. So the goal is to train your mind that you still need to stay locked in going full speed until you are actually a few seconds over the camera line. You can actually lose quite a bit of speed on your average if you start slowing down before you've crossed that last line with the cameras. That's gonna take your exit speed. So I personally counted loudly for myself because I remember the second year I went, I could see on my videos that I actually almost started to lift up a bit coming to the finish because I was getting nervous about the stop as it is such a short distance, so I sort of lost some speed. But last year I counted, after I crossed the finish line, I counted 2 seconds, and after 2 seconds I pressed as hard as I can on my sail, going into a sharp downwind turn. The way to actually do the stop is to go in a sharp downwind turn and then make a short turn upwind again and then coming to a halt. Because you've got so much speed, you actually need some double turns to jump all that speed. But I was unable to do another upwind turn because of the risk I had in having all that power in my sail coming from this side if I had to open up the sail again and ripping out my shoulder. So I only laid down once and I did a downwind, almost like a downwind 360, because most of the times it was too much power for me to stop, and I went all the way around, not being heavy enough to put it down completely into the water and stopping, and then the wind would lift me up from the front, and it sort of like lifted my complete system up in the sky and it throwed it 180 degrees to the other end. And that was really nerve-wracking for me, because it was so easy for me to let go of my gear. Because when you are being pulled over like that and your entire board and sail flies out of the water over your head into the other side, holding on to everything is the most vital part of your survival in that situation. This process physically was more tiring for me than anything else. I would say even the water starts was easier for me than stopping. And a lot of people don't really know that. I think on the footage on the outside it really looks quite easy. Everyone seems to really do it easily. If you've got a lot of weight on you, the guys who are double my weight, obviously I think they have it much more easier to put down that sail and to get stopped. But at that point in time, if you lose your sail, it will definitely blow all the way back to town. Your gear would keep on blowing and running away from you and it would be trashed. At the finish block, there's these nasty gusts that blows, really harsh gusts. That's where I actually had my dislocation in my left shoulder happening in my second year. I got in the finish block and I was holding my sail, and in that moment one of those nasty gusts came and it blew the sail completely out of my arm and it dislocated my shoulder. So I'm really terrified of the finish block after that year. It was a really big mental challenge for me to overcome. From the footage on social media, it looks like a really smooth, flat, easy channel. Everything looks like glassy, and some of the footage from the drones makes it look really wide. And a lot of people have a really big misconception about how difficult it really is when you are there in person and competing. The further you go down the channel, the more the chop starts to build. I personally had a lot of difficulty injuring my foot when doing that lay down finish, because going like this on my board and putting my entire body on top of the water flat, my foot was overstrained, bent in this position. And with the added lead weight on my back, it put so much pressure in that angle with the added banging. So my foot did this over the edge. I needed to strap it up and I needed to carry on, because I was only there for 2 weeks and there was no time to just wait it out. That kind of overuse injury builds up as you go. So the second half of my time at Luderitz, I really had a lot of struggle with my foot. So luckily my dad strapped it up very nicely for me, and I managed to put it out of my mind. Managing your gear, getting it all on the trailer with that added lead weight on you and operating in winds that are up to 80 to 100 kilometers an hour is really a physical strain. Most of your energy goes into the gear handling, and this is a whole day. You need to use your time very effectively at Luderitz. You need to know exactly what you are going to do, how you are going to do it, what's your next plan, what's your next change, what's your next step. And if you do not reach that goal, if you set yourself a speed goal that day to increase by half a knot or a knot, if you don't reach that goal after a few runs, you need to start make quick changes, because your energy physically, mentally really runs out quickly. And you cannot really afford to do empty runs. In each run, you need to learn something. You need to think of something. You need to actually think how this can improve. You can never get comfortable. Severn sails are so dedicated to develop the speed sailing discipline and to push the boundaries in the world of speed sailing that they put an entire research and development team into making speed sails specifically custom made for Luderitz. I feel super privileged to be part of them in this discipline because they are really out there themselves at the event, testing the gear, seeing what works, what doesn't, and I can feel it in the speed sails. Every single year, it just improves by massive leaps.